Wish SE. Had a couple of comments recently from subscribers who questioned the value of training or questioned whether or not your average civilian benefits from training, or whether training is just a way to to gouge prospective students so they can live out their fantasies. So I thought I'd address that. I have spent a ton of money going to training because, as I always said, I'm a student first, I'm an instructor second. So I've spent over 400 hours at different schools, working with different people at all levels. So these are trainers, many of whom are former military guys. A couple of them are Tier 1 operators. Tier 1, by what I mean, is Army, Special Forces, specifically Delta, and SEALs, specifically DevGroup. So whether or not you find there's value there, up to you. And what I've done in studying with people is I've learned things that work for me, and in my evolution I've also wanted to share those things with civilians. Most civilians, thankfully, we have law enforcement to do the tough job of being a force to go out and deal with a problem. As civilians, my job is to be a good witness, and my goal in an armed encounter is to avoid it at all costs. So run, hide, and fight. That's my philosophy. What we teach our students are really the basics of safety, the fundamentals of marksmanship, and then the ability to have some level of proficiency to know how to run their gun under stress. We, the group I work with, we don't teach tactics. We don't teach how to, breach doors and come in and do all kinds of crazy stuff. What we do is we teach civilians in the safe, practical use of firearms so that if they're in that armed encounter, they'd at least have a chance. I don't claim to be an expert at tactics and military applications and police training and all that kind of stuff. I've been fortunate enough to be able to do training with some very high caliber people and work with law enforcement officers, so I have some understanding of what those guys have to do. So why do we train? Well, I train to develop my skills, my proficiency, and ultimately my confidence in my ability to run my gun. Most civilians, fortunately, we still have the Second Amendment, which guarantees us the right to personal protection and firearms for self-defense. Most civilians go out and they buy a gun and they say, well, I've got this gun for personal protection or self-defense, and that's awesome, but that's only the part one. The second part is learning the skills and having the ability to actually know how to run that gun if things go bad. So if it's a semi-auto, what happens if the gun goes click instead of bang? How do you clear that malfunction? What do you do in terms of shooting once you've shot and you have tunnel vision and you're totally focused on the threat? Why do you get off the point of attack? Why do you move? Why do you scan and assess? A lot of people make fun of that because they said, oh, well, that's just all created stuff. But I have been fortunate enough to study with people who I consider experts, people who've actually done it, who've been in gunfights. And what they say is when someone is shooting at you, you become very focused on the threat and you have tunnel vision. So once you've dealt with the threat and you've moved, right, you're not standing still. I totally get that. The reason that we teach people in a static line is because we've got 4 or 5 people, sometimes 10 people on a line. We can't have people doing a lot of movement and maintain safety. So we choreograph those movements of stepping off the line of attack and reloading, or stepping back to the side, shooting from cover. We choreograph that because we need to teach people what to do. What we also know is people revert under stress to their lowest level of training. And it doesn't matter whether it's civilian, law enforcement, or military. If your training has only had you do one thing, put your ammo after you've spent it, after the ammunition is spent, into your pocket, guess what? As we know from law enforcement shootings, those guys that used to run revolvers and they were told, always dump your empties and stick them in your pocket so you don't have to pick them up from the range afterwards. When they were in gunfights, that's what they did. So that proves that people will do what they're trained to do because your training ultimately will take over. If you've had no training, then you have no baseline from which to work from. So the bottom line for me is I encourage anyone who owns a firearm to get some training. And it doesn't matter what kind of training that is. I would start with a basic safety class. NRA has a great basic safety class. NRA has a number of good classes. That's one aspect. However, I would also encourage you to go to any school or work with a certified instructor to work on developing those skills of self-defense. Part of that self-defense training should be first thinking about when you would use a firearm. My philosophy, the one we teach on target training, is run, hide, and fight. Bottom line is, with any tool you need to know how to use that tool and use that tool effectively so that if your life depends on it, it's going to be able to be something that you can use to potentially save your life and the life of your loved ones. So that's a quick rant on training, why do it, some things that I think are very important for people to consider. If you're interested in training with On Target Training, you can reach us at our website, www.on-target-training.net. You can visit us on Facebook at On Target Training New Hampshire, one string of words, and you can certainly reach us through our YouTube channel. If you don't train with me, totally okay, but go somewhere. There are a lot of great people out there who can provide training for you, help you develop the fundamental skills of safety, proficiency, efficiency that will lead to confidence, and ultimately that's what we all need. Hey, thanks so much for watching, and as always, stay safe.